Okay, good morning. This is Ken Yaffe. I'm a volunteer with the American Red Cross, and today we are interviewing Mr. Joe Oliver Apodaca. You like to go by Oliver?
I go by Oliver, yes.
Okay. You were in the U.S. Navy during the Korean War, and you finished your service as a commissaryman second class. Is
That's
that correct?
correct, yes.
Okay. You were born on June 18th, 1930, so happy recent birthday.
This,
And that was in Gardner, New Mexico.
yes.
Today is June 22nd, 2017. We're in Thornton, Colorado, and this recording is for the Veterans History Project out of the Library of Congress. Oliver, tell me how it was that you came to join the U.S. Navy.
Well, it was during the Korean War, of course, and I was in line to be drafted, and rather than to be drafted, I thought it would be better to join the Navy and maybe have it a little easier being in service, and I always admired and liked the Navy. So that was my incentive to get into to join the Navy.
Did you have any knowledge about the Navy beforehand? Maybe?
Very little. I had never seen the ocean, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
So after boot camp and going to San Diego, that was the first time I'd ever seen the ocean. And actually, I had never seen a palm tree till we got to San Diego. So that was an experience in itself, right there.
Yeah. Had anyone else in your family served? Maybe father?
No, my dad was too young for the First World War, too old for the Second. So he never served. I don't think any of his brothers served. He had several brothers, but I don't think any of them did.
Okay, so this was a brand new experience. You were going into the
Going
Navy.
into the military was brand new to me, yes.
Wow. So tell me, where did you go to enlist? And
we went down to the courthouse here in Denver. It was on, I think it's 20th and Stout, I believe. And a friend of mine decided that we wanted to join because he was in the same boat I was in. So we went down to join, and we went through our physicals. And as we finished the physicals, my buddy came out and says, "I didn't pass." I said, "You didn't pass?" He said, "I passed." So he says, "They won't take me." And I says, Bill Allen was his name, "Why in the world didn't you pass?" And he says, "I slurred my S's." I said, "You slurred your S's and you didn't pass?" And he says, "They told me I had to go to some kind of therapy and see if I could correct that." So consequently, I ended up going into boot camp by myself, as opposed to being with Bill, who was going to be my buddy.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 1951, so I was 19 years old. Is that right? I was born in 30. I was 21. 21, not quite 20, 20, because I was 21 in June. Yes.
Okay.
So it wasn't to be for me and Bill to go to service together. He got therapy
a little bit.
Pardon?
Did that shake you a little bit? Like
yes, I was very disappointed. Yes,
yeah.
Because I had signed the papers. I was in,
Right.
and he wasn't. He didn't make it. So it was 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month later. He went to some kind of therapy class, and he got in after that. He got into the Navy, and I went to Great Lakes right out of Chicago for my boot camp training, and Bill, a month later, he went to San Diego.
Oh.
I did get to see him during he was aboard ship too in the Far East, so during the time that we were in the service, we got to see a couple of times during that time we got to see each other.
But you had to you had to start the journey on your own.
On my own, yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about going to Great Lakes. What was the? Was this the first time you were traveling on your own?
That was probably the first time I was really on my own. Although I went to the University of Colorado and I was somewhat on my own, but I came home weekends and worked while I was in the university. So going to San Diego, I was by myself. Going to
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes. Mom and Dad took me to the train station, the Union Station downtown. I got aboard, I think it was the city of Denver or whatever train it was, and we zoomed out to Grand Lakes overnight. The following morning, I woke up to see San Diego, a smoky, dirty city that I thought Chicago was going to be a nice, great city. I was disappointed because it was it looked so dirty and filthy. But apparently it was in the area where the trains were all.
The depot.
It just wasn't the great city that I thought, but it was all right. And I went to get aboard another train that took us to Great Lakes.
Okay.
This was along with probably 20 or 30 guys that we picked up along the way, some in Iowa, some in Nebraska, and they boarded I guess you'd call it a troop train, and we zoomed down out to.
Were you forming any relationships at that time? Were you bonding with at that time?
Yes, there was a couple of guys that went to high school with me, and I never knew them, but obviously since we were from Denver, we got a little bonding going there, and as a matter of fact, a couple of the guys ended up being friends for many years.
Okay, very good. Mm-hmm. So you arrive at Great Lakes, you step off the train and...
Off the train, and the first thing is one of the non-commissioned officers, pretty tough guys, get up there and line up and all the military stuff that I wasn't used to. But it wasn't a bad deal. I was able to assimilate with what was going on. We got our uniforms. We went into a great big barracks, and they issued our uniforms, and the civilian clothes we had were put in a box and sealed, and with our address and everything to be shipped back home, and we got into our uniforms. Mm-hmm. And first time I'd been in a uniform in my entire life. So that started the military service career.
I imagine they shaved off some of your hair.
Oh, they did that, yes. I can remember the barbers, everybody lining up to get their hair cut, mm-hmm. and the smart aleck barber says, how much do you want? A little bit off the sides? And I didn't say much. I said, do what you have to do. So he cut my hair completely off, just a little tiny bit left. Right. And it grew. It didn't take long. It grew back, so that wasn't a big deal.
And everyone went through the same thing?
Everybody went through the same thing. We got our shots that made many of them sick, including myself. I was sick for a couple of days. Not severely sick, but I didn't feel well. So we went through that. A couple of the guys I remember were being ready to get their shots, and a couple of them keeled over. They weren't used to shots, I guess. I guess the stress of being there and everything, right. They keeled over, and they propped them up and stabbed the needle, and they survived.
Mm-hmm. What happened next? What were the next things?
We went through boot training, and we went to classes. We went to fire drills to put out fires with the hose and that type of thing, put on a gas mask. We did some shooting on the range. We went through swimming tests to see if you could swim, and if you couldn't swim, they gave you lessons in the afternoon, at night actually, mm-hmm. after supper, and the guys that couldn't swim ended up going to the classes and trying to learn how to swim. There was a few that
mm-hmm.
that couldn't swim, and it was kind of rough to see the poor guys that couldn't swim, because they were pretty tough on them. They shoved them into the water, And, you know, if you can't swim, they were kind of struggling in the water, and they had a big bamboo rod. And when they decided that it was time for them to grab hold of the rod, they pulled them back to the edge of the pool. But it was tough to see those poor guys struggling.
Wow.
It was tough.
Yeah. So
I had swam in high school. I was on the swimming team, so that was easy for me. So
yeah, obviously no problem.
That was pretty
there.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like boot camp was focused around preparing you to be a crew member on a ship.
Yes. Yes.
Putting out fires, being on fire
that type
suppression
of thing,
crew.
preparing you for what might happen aboard ship or wherever duty you ended up
Right.
going to.
Did you have any idea what you were going to do at this point? Did you know
at
yet?
that point, no. Had no idea. The fact that they assigned us to the ship was something I didn't know about. After boot camp, we came home, and then for a couple of weeks, and then went back, and they had our assignments all set up. So you're going here, you're going there, and all the people in the company had different assignments, although some of the guys that were in boot camp were assigned to the same ship I was.
Okay.
So the guys that I had bonded with in boot camp went to the same ship, and that made it a little easier.
Sure.
Because there were some guys that I knew aboard ship,
Yeah.
so that made it much easier, yes.
How long did boot camp last?
16 weeks,
16.
yes.
Okay. And what other types of things do you remember?
About boot camp?
Yeah.
Well, I remember drilling, the drills they had a place where you drilled and learned how to march a little bit. I remember specifically going to eat at the mess hall. We'd line up ready to eat, and then Company 153, it's your turn. So we'd march into the mess hall. Food was excellent. I'd never eaten any better in my life. You know, I came from a very poor family, and we had steak very seldom. And I think that was the first time I really had a real steak in my life. So the food was a little different than I was used to, but I got used to it very fast, and I gained a lot of weight. I weighed probably 135, 40 pounds when I went in. When I came out of the boot camp, I was closer to 65, 165 or so. So I gained a lot of weight. We did a lot of rope climbing and you know, a lot of physical activity, which probably helped, and good food, and slept well. So that probably made us feel, or made us a little tougher.
Right. So you mentioned you swam in high school?
Yes, I was on the swimming team for high school.
Okay, so you were already fairly athletic.
I was, yeah. I got my my letter in high school in swimming, and I also lettered in tennis.
Okay.
But I was too little to be a basketball player. I was never more than 5'8", maybe 5'9" if I tiptoed. But I was too small for football. So the options left were swimming, which wasn't great, but I could swim. And tennis, there again, good enough to make the team, but not much more than that.
So transitioning to a physical military existence wasn't too much of a
No, it wasn't much of
challenge
a
for you.
struggle. No, I could handle it.
Very good.
Yeah, push-ups and pull-ups and that type of thing were not a big deal for me. I could handle it okay.
So you received your assignment while you were at boot camp?
After boot camp, after we went back to the.
Oh, okay.
After boot camp, we got 2 weeks leave, and then we went back to boot camp, and that's when they assigned you.
Okay.
We were there for maybe a day or two while they assigned the stations we were going to, and that's when I learned that I was going to go to an APA 45 attack transport. I didn't know anything about what that was or anything.
It was just a name of a craft that you were going to.
That's about it.
Yeah, but you still didn't know what you were going to do.
I didn't even know what I was going to do.
Wow.
So got aboard the train to take you to San Diego. We went from San Diego down through, I guess it was Oklahoma and maybe Texas, down to New Mexico, Arizona, and into San Diego. As we got to San Diego, the ship I was going to be on had just left. It had gone to Bremerton, Washington for repairs and reconditioning. And so we were there for a night, along with the other guys that were going to go aboard that ship. And
This was the USS Henrico?
yes, the USS
Okay.
Enrico. We waited there overnight. The next morning they put us aboard a train again. We had been on a train from Chicago to San Diego, and then we thought we were going to be aboard ship. The ship left. Why they left and left us waiting there, I'll never know. But they went to Bremerton, Washington, and we went on a train from San Diego to Bremerton, all along the coast. And I guess we caught the ship 3 days later. Or the ship was already there, so we went aboard ship when we got to Bremerton.
You mentioned earlier, I think, that arriving in San Diego is the first time you saw a palm tree. Is that
That's the first time I'd seen a palm tree
And
and
the
seen the ocean.
so? Do you recollect any of your feelings about that? You see the ocean.
I was kind of impressed, I guess is the right word. The ocean was probably more magnificent than I thought it would be. It just seemed like a body of water that was endless. And the biggest body of water I'd seen was probably City Park here in Denver.
Right.
So, yeah, it was kind of overwhelming to see that body of
I
water.
bet it was. Yeah. So you didn't spend any time in San Diego then?
No, not at that
Just
time.
straight back.
Straight back,
to,
yeah.
up north to.
I did spend a lot of time in San Diego afterwards, during my stay in the Navy, my time in the Navy.
Okay, so you arrive in Washington and you board your ship for the first time.
I got aboard ship first time. They
Tell us about
lined
that
us up on
experience,
deck, and there must have been probably 20, 25 or so people that were just boarding the ship. The non-commissioned officer stood up there and he says, "Are you guys in a position to tell me what you did while you were in the civilian life and what you did that can be of use while you're aboard the ship or being in the Navy?" So I stepped forward and I said, "Yeah, I was a baker. I've been a baker since I was a kid, and you come with me." And one of the people in the commissary department, they brought me downstairs,
Yeah.
below decks.
Below deck.
And they introduced me to some of the people from the commissary department and told me, "This is going to be your bunk, and we'll assign to where you're going to work and what you're going to do."
That was it. All you had to say was,
I was a
I know
baker
how to
and I
bake.
was in. Yeah.
wow.
And that was a pretty good deal because I enjoyed the baking life aboard ship. Some of the other people that had to work in different parts of the ship, it was I wouldn't have liked it. They had midnight watches and early morning watches and that type of thing, and I was pretty much worked during the day and slept during the night. Had to get up early to get breakfast ready for the crew and stuff, but it ended up being a good deal for me.
How was it that you had the experience baking? Your family?
Well, when we left Raton to come to Denver, I was about 12 years old, and I was during the summertime, and in this 1942, and there was not too many people in the age bracket to be bakers. They were all in the service. They were all had been inducted into the service. So I went to this bakery and I asked for a job, and the boss looked at me and kind of shook his head. He says, "Okay, come in tomorrow," because I was just a little guy.
Yeah.
So I stayed there for 33 years,
Wow.
and that's in that same bakery.
Wow. Okay.
Ended up as a little kid cleaning up pans and sweeping the floors, and ended up being the CEO, superintendent of the bakery.
How do you like that? Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, maybe.
Yes.
Okay, so you got your assignment, and what kind of training did they provide? What was different about Navy baking than what you had already
Well,
experienced?
it was pretty much the same. They had their own recipes, of course, which is not a big deal for me. I'd done that many times. And I was there for probably 3 or 4 months, as I recall. And then they sent me to commissary school. So I went to commissary school in San Diego for, I think it was 12 weeks, as I recall. And came back to aboard ship and worked in the galley for just 2 or 3 weeks or so, and then they said, "Well, we need a baker, so you're in a bakery." So the chief said, "Your assignment is a bakery. You're going to be running the bakery." So that's what I did, and that's where I stayed my entire naval career, in that same ship, same bakery. We had probably 4 to 6 bakers that helped me bake all the bakery items for the bread, rolls, cakes, pies, pretty much an entire line of baked goods.
How much flexibility did you have to create your own menu?
Very little, although I did some of that, but most of the time the chief would set up the menu for the week. I think he set it up for the entire month, I don't remember for sure, but I'd check what was going to be served the following day, like maybe apple pie. So I'd have to go and set up to make the pie in the morning and have fresh pie for the noon meal or the evening meal. Check all the items I would return to the bakery, and I made that product to satisfy the menu.
So I imagine you would also have to, ensure that you had the right supplies to do that.
What now again?
You'd have to confirm that you had the right supplies.
Oh
to
yes,
satisfy
the
the menu.
supplies were down below deck, below the bakery deck, and I'd have to bring out the flour and the shortening and the eggs and whatever I had to use to prepare the product.
Did you ever find there was a shortage of anything, or did you ever have to get
No,
creative?
pretty much that ship was an attack transport, and they transported a lot of troops, so there was always plenty of supplies aboard ship. I don't ever remember being short of anything of any consequence. A lot of the time we used fresh eggs, as opposed to some places where they used dried eggs. So the menu aboard that ship was excellent.
Pretty good.
I'll never eat any better than I did aboard ship.
It's good to hear.
Yes.
Did you ever encounter any technical difficulties? Was the equipment, the ovens and such, was all that reliable? And
They were all pretty reliable. I had deck ovens, they call them, aboard ship, in the bakery. We had a steam kettle. We had a bread slicer, a bench, a bread mixer. So we were pretty well supplied. It wasn't a big area, but it was big enough to do what had to be done, to bake for the troops and the ship's company.
did you ever encounter any problems, like problems that you would have to solve or
Yeah,
unexpected
I had a couple of
situations?
kind of funny incidents. They weren't funny at the time, of course. I had to make bread for the following day, so we have to make sponges. I don't know whether you know what sponges are. It's a premix, and then they're remixed with some of the other ingredients. And I had one of the Marines that came aboard. I told him to go and mix the yeast with some warm water incorporate into the bread mixing. So he says, okay. So he went and mixed the yeast, and I put it in the bread mixture, and the darn bread wouldn't rise. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. So he did it again, and I watched him do it. The water was too hot. It killed the yeast. And so I had to throw away the first batch and start over again.
Right.
So that was probably one of the bad incidents that happened, which wasn't a big deal. It ended up having to work half the night instead.
Yeah, but at the time,
Yes.
It like you said.
It was kind of funny. It wasn't funny then, it was funny now.
Yeah. Any other memorable events
No,
while
pretty
they-
much everybody was very nice. They'd send in the Marines or the Army would send in 3 or 4 of their people in to help serve at the chow line, and pretty much they were okay. I never had any problems with them. They were pretty nice people.
And you were responsible for the baking activity?
Yes,
And you
I
had
was in
other-
charge of the bakery.
Other
yes.
seamen working for you?
Yeah, we had, as I mentioned, I think 4 to 6 people
Okay,
working.
handful,
A lot of them weren't bakers, of course, and I had to help them a little bit, show them how things were done, since I had a little bit more experience than most of them did. So.
Now, you mentioned that after the service, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, we'll come back, but that you continued baking in your career.
Yeah, after I left the service,
Yeah.
after I was discharged,
Did you
I
pick
went
up
back to the bakery that I had worked as a teenager.
anything that you learned as a baker in the Navy? Were you able to use that to maybe improve baking in your career? Was there anything that the Navy offered you that?
Well, probably maybe a little discipline in the way you
Okay.
did your work. I was always pretty much disciplined to making things right at the bakery, and I was never a kind of guy that was lazy or tried to let things ride. I was always pretty much involved with what was going on and making sure that the product we made was as good as possible.
Okay.
Which probably helped me in getting to be the superintendent or CEO of the bakery. So
Right.
maybe my naval career was instrumental in that too.
So back on the ship, you tell me about where the ship went. Yeah,
Well, we from Bremerton, after the ship was there for about 3 months, they were rebuilding it, not rebuilding it, but making it a little better than it was before, a better galley, and overall, I guess the whole ship was refurbished. And we went from Bremerton to San Diego, and we got orders there to go to, we were going to go to Japan and then get troops to go to South Korea. We took a load, we loaded up in San Diego with, I don't remember whether they were Marines, I think they were Marines, and we left San Diego and we stopped at Hawaii for a couple of days and got supplies that we needed. And then we went from Hawaii to Kobe, Japan. That was the first city that we went to in Japan when I was in the service.
What was your first journey like out at sea?
I was never real comfortable for 2 or 3 days. I was always kind of seasick, and I didn't feel good.
Where was the bakery located in the ship?
It was on the second deck,
Okay.
one below the main deck.
Okay, was it towards the front or the?
It was about the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one of the better places to be.
Actually, yeah, probably.
In terms of seasickness,
Yeah, in retrospect, that I never thought about
Yeah.
it, but that was probably a good. Even though it was probably better than some of the front end or the back end, the fore and aft, but it was still
You still,
pretty in heavy seas. It was tough sometimes baking cakes because it was moving around, and you know you put cake batter in a pan, and the darn thing would be moving all over, and you end up with a cake that was a quarter of an inch on one end and spilling over at the other end. So it was a little tough in that respect. But a lot of times, when the seas were calm, it was okay.
was the crew forgiving if a cake didn't come out just right?
Oh yeah, they ate whatever was put in front of it.
They were thankful to have a cake. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's funny, you don't think of that.
Yeah, I remember one of their favorites was lemon meringue pie, and anytime we had lemon meringue pie, it seemed like the whole crew came in. A lot of the times, if they didn't like what was on the menu, they'd wait till the next meal to see if they could find something that was to their liking. Meringue pie, that brought everybody out.
Hawaii, did you get to any time to see Hawaii while you were there?
Oh yes, we were there probably 2 or 3 days. I'd never seen Hawaii, of course, and we got to go out to Waikiki Beach for a little while. I was there afterwards in making 2 or 3 trips from Japan to San Diego, and I think we made either 2 or 3 trips, but we stopped in San Diego. Well, towards the end of my enlistment, we were there for about 3 months. And actually at that time, if your wives wanted to go, they could go with you. And they actually were able to take cars. They hoisted the cars and put them into the hold, and they did that for us. And the wives could go. They went aboard ship. They stayed in the officers' quarters somewhere. I don't. My wife didn't go. I was married at that time.
Oh, you were married?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last year of my enlistment, I was
Okay.
married, and my wife stayed in San Diego. She had working for the government. I think she was working for the FHA, a couple of different government agencies. She worked in government most of her career, and she stayed there because we needed the money. Because I was going to be out in another year, so she stayed there and made a little money, so we'd have something to fall on when I left the Navy.
Well, since you mentioned your wife, how did you meet her while you were in the Navy?
My wife, we went to the same high school. She was a little older than I was. She was about 3-4 years older than I was. And one of her cousins, I believe, introduced me to her. And that's the way we met. And we met, dated for probably 2 or 3 years, and then I went into the Navy, and she waited for me till I got out.
Okay.
Well, actually, she didn't wait till I got out.
Right.
We got married when I was still had a year to go.
And you were able to do that when the ship came back to
Yeah, I came on leave to Denver,
Okay.
and we were married here in Denver.
How did she feel about your time at sea?
Well, she didn't like the
She didn't
fact
like
that I was in the Navy and away, but that's the way it was.
Yeah. Were you able to correspond with her?
Oh yeah, we corresponded probably too much. Yeah, I wrote letters and she wrote letters, of course. And after she stayed in the San Diego, in an apartment there, and she didn't know San Diego. She hadn't been away from Colorado very much either, and she was kind of on her own in San Diego, but she managed okay, and she got her job all lined up, and she ended up having a good job.
Yeah, very good.
And I kind of wanted to stay in San Diego, but I like San Diego, one of my favorite cities. But no, she didn't want to go. She didn't want to stay in San Diego. Her family was all in Denver. I got to go back home. So we came back home. And probably in retrospect, it was probably okay because I came back to work at the bakery. And I had a job waiting for me. So
So back on the ship, After Hawaii, I know you said you went to Japan. That was your first.
Yeah, the first trip was to Japan,
Right.
from Hawaii to Japan.
When was that? I meant to ask you.
It was probably in 1951,
Okay.
at probably the last part of 51, because I left boot camp probably in April of 51.
And at what point did your ship participate in the Korean War?
Probably in last part of 51, 52, and probably part of 53. I'm not sure that the war had ended by then. Actually, they didn't call it a war, did they?
At the time, I think they were just using conflict, right? Or,
Yeah, they used a different term.
action, police action.
Yeah,
or
police action or
something like
something,
that, right? What do you remember about that? What do you remember about participating, in the Korean War?
Since I was aboard ship, my duty was making sure that everybody got fed. I used to go up on the main deck, and they had cargo nets over the side of the ship, and the Marines or the people that were going ashore climbed down the nets with their full pack and into the landing craft below, and
And did you were able to observe this?
yeah, I wanted to watch them. I'd never seen it done before, so I watched them climb over the side and into the landing crafts. They had several landing crafts aboard ships. Aboard ship, they had what do they call, LC landing craft medium or something like
Okay.
that. LCMs, I think they were called, and they were bigger craft. They held about 72 soldiers, and they with a full pack, and they went to the beach, and then the front end came down, of course, and they marched on to the beach. And then they had some smaller ones that held maybe 36 to 40, somewhere in that area, and they were a little smaller craft. They were a little more maneuverable, and they carried troops aboard or down to the beach.
And you tend to remember being there at Incheon?
Yeah, Incheon. Where was it? I think we got to Seoul, Busan.
Busan?
There was a couple others that most of the time we'd end up about 1 or 2 miles from the beach.
That's what I was going to ask you. How close did you get?
Yeah,
to
we
the
got
beach?
about 2 miles from the beach, and then they loaded up and went to the beach. Coxmen were the people that took the soldiers to the beach. They were not too happy about having to go into the beach, but they actually, I don't think they saw any real bullets coming. But the action that I saw late at night, you could go on deck and you could see flashes ashore. I don't know whether they were bombs or what they were, but we could see flashes at night. And for a long time there were planes that came over the ship, and of course we had all the lights were off, blackout, and why they never bombed us, I'll never know, because they came right over above us, and
Oh, these were enemy
planes,
Enemy
and they
Really?
never dropped a bomb in our area. Most of the time we had our battle stations to go to. We had 5-inch gun in the front and forward, and a 5-inch gun aft. And my battle station was in the aft 5-inch gun.
What was your responsibility?
I had from the ammo locker, they had the missiles, which were 5-inch and probably 24 inches long, heavy as can be. And then they had the ammo, the powder, and they were brass. They were about maybe a little bit bigger, and they had a cork on one end to hold the powder in, I guess. And they passed it from the locker from one guy to the next and up into the gun, and then the guy at the gun pushed the projectile into the 5-inch gun, and the brass powder behind it, and locked it. And then when the control officer said fire, he moved the gun to where he wanted to fire. Then they'd fire.
And you were in that chain of men
I was
passing
in the chain,
the powder
the
and
powder and the projectile.
okay.
And actually, we didn't fire at the enemy or anything. We did that. We did that a lot of times in practice.
Drills.
Just practice, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had actually done that. Okay. What else do you remember about support? Your ship supporting any action. Did you have any crewmates that went ashore, and did they share any experiences?
No, none of the people aboard ship went ashore. The ones that got closest were the guys that guided the boat into the beach, but the rest of the crew stayed aboard ship.
Okay, so you never got too close to like the soldiers or the Marines?
Well, the soldiers and Marines, we cared about, I think it was about 12 to 1,600 Marines and soldiers, and I don't think I mentioned, but we fed them twice a day, once in the morning, once at night. They didn't have a noon meal, and they gave them a little tag, blue tag and a red tag or whatever it was, and they presented that at the entrance to the mess hall, and if you were a morning guy, you presented your tag and went through the line, and at night you did the same. You had an identification card to let you know that you could come in to eat. With that was a long time. It'd take 2 to 3 hours to feed them in the morning, because we didn't have enough time to clean up and feed them in the noon. So we cleaned up and got everything ready for the night meal. And then they ate at night, and that was the 2 meals that they had.
You mentioned that it seemed like enemy aircraft were flying in the vicinity. Did you ever feel at risk? Was there ever any instances that you felt the ship was maybe exposed?
No, well, you always felt a little apprehensive that, they could have very easily dropped a bomb or maybe a torpedo or something. But I don't know why. As I mentioned before, they never did that. We were probably fortunate.
Right.
Yeah.
So looking back, 60 years now from the Korean War, there were a lot of, there's a lot of politics and there was a lot of movement. It got pretty touch and go there for a while.
You mean in the
Just the whole war and
the whole war
in context. Were you aware of the flow?
I wasn't really aware. I knew we're there to defend our country, and I wanted to do that. I felt like it was a duty to do that. To this day, I feel like everybody that out of high school should go in the service for a year or two, just to learn the discipline and how to take care of yourself. I think Israel does that, but I really, to this day, I feel like a youngster out of high school should go in the service. I really feel that deeply.
So I was going to ask you about that later, but so maybe we'll get back to that. So you were out at sea for, I guess, a couple of years, a few tours.
Yeah, actually, the whole. Probably closer to 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
Okay. And was any tour, well, how long was a typical tour before you maybe come back to your home port?
Probably a year and a half or so.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we made two or three tours that we'd come back and then go back out.
Okay. Were any of those tours any more memorable or problematic or troublesome in any way? Or?
No, they were all pretty much mundane.
Okay.
The service, you know, it's all pretty much day in and out routine, with some periods of frustration, and
Right.
but mostly it's pretty routine. And the good thing about it is you made a lot of friends.
Well, tell me a little bit about some of the friends you made.
Oh, there's several people that are dear friends. Most of them are gone now. There was a guy from Nebraska that was a good friend of mine, John Willen was his name, and he passed away a few years ago. And some of the other ones, of course, I lost contact after the service, but some of them came by and saw me here in Denver. Not too many, but some. A funny story that I might relate is my wife and I went to the circus one time. It was not too long after I got out of the service, and we were sitting at the seats watching the service, and here comes a guy, and he sits right next to me and taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around. It was a guy I had served in the Navy with, and he was kind of a wild guy and probably had a little too much to drink a lot of the times, and he had joined the circus, and he
joined the circus.
He had joined the circus, and he was a part of the circus crew. And he came by and he saw me, and it was kind of an unusual thing, you know, to see. I can't even remember his name now, but
Okay.
he had joined the circus, and he was part of the circus crew.
Interesting.
You know.
So, while you were on out at sea or on ship, did you have any downtime? Any time for recreation?
Oh yes, yeah.
How did you spend your time?
Yeah, we'd be Yokosuka and Yokohama and actually Tokyo, I believe. My brother was in the Air Force.
Oh.
And I got to see him in Tokyo. At that time, it was called Haneda Airport. Later changed to Tokyo International. And I went to see him and spend some time with him. We went to some of the bars in Tokyo. He was familiar with Tokyo, of course. So
Okay. What did he do in the Air Force?
I don't know exactly what he did.
Okay.
He was in there. I don't know whether he was in there for a full 4 years or 2 years. I don't
Okay.
remember. But I got some pictures of him.
Oh, okay.
Of him and I at the. I think it was the NCO club in Japan.
Okay. So when you were in Japan, did you have the opportunity to meet or mix with any locals?
No, I never got to meet any of the local people.
Okay.
No.
Were there other sites that you were able to
We
see?
went to Mount Fuji, of course. We were anchored right at the base of Mount Fuji for a few days. And I can remember getting up in the morning when we were there and went up on deck and looking up, and I see this Mount Fuji is just an unbelievable sight. It's quite a sight to see Mount Fuji.
Yeah, I was in Japan many years ago and just saw it from a distance.
Did you see Mount Fuji?
But from a distance, it was kind of like rising from
It's quite a sight.
Yes.
Yeah. We were right close.
So, anything else in terms of like time off or recreation? Any USO shows or? Anything
No,
like
we
that?
never. I saw USO shows when I was in commissary school, but that was the only time.
Oh, okay.
What was the name of Cole? Nat King Cole.
Nat King,
Yeah, I
okay.
saw him there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was drunker than a skunk.
Really?
Yeah, he was supposed to be there, I think, 7 or 8 o'clock, and he didn't show up till about 8 or 9, and he was drunk. But he put on a good show.
Yeah.
You know, it was okay. You know, Nat King Cole was a pretty great entertainer, and I enjoyed that. Yeah.
So before we transition to your post-service life, anything else you want to share
No, I
perhaps
think
experiences and-
my life in the Navy was something I'll always treasure.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed life in the Navy. I thought 4 years was probably a little too long. I can remember after 2 years and late at night, I was on the main deck there, and I'm looking at this late at night and kind of despondent, maybe a little depressed. I said, how am I ever going to make 2 more years?
Oh, yeah.
But I made it, and in retrospect and looking back, my life in the Navy was time well spent and precious.
Yeah, you started to talk about that a little earlier, about your impression of being in the service and the impact it had on you. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, being a sailor was a pleasure. I liked the uniform. I liked the place we went to. I really liked it. I liked my country.
And your thoughts about the military in general, perhaps over time, still have great respect for the service, and you already mentioned you thought it would be a good idea for people, for young kids to
Yes.
serve. Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's a good place to spend the first years of your life. I think it would serve you for the rest of your life.
Tell me about your transition out of the Navy and into civilian life.
After I got discharged, of course, I had already written to the company I worked for, the bakery I worked for, and that I was getting out, and they were very nice. You have your job. They said that when I joined the Navy and I was working there, you'll have a job here whenever you come back. So
Even 4 years later.
Yeah, a few years later, when I wrote a letter to the superintendent of the bakery at the time and told him I was coming back. He says, "Come by, your job is waiting for you." So I went back into the bakery, and
Of course, they were confident since you spent
yeah,
the
I'd
last
been there
4
before.
years.
I knew just about everybody that was there. It was a pretty big bakery. We had as many as 200 people working there.
Oh.
It was probably the biggest bakery in Colorado at that time. Probably a full-service bakery. It was a supermarket to supply supermarkets all the way from Pueblo all the way up to Cheyenne.
What was the name of the bakery?
Well, the name of the company when I first started was named Miller's Supermarkets, and it was owned by a couple of entrepreneurs, two brothers that owned it. And then they sold it to National Tea, which was a big grocery chain in the Midwest. And they bought it, and then they expanded the grocery chain to include, as I mentioned, open stores all the way from Cheyenne to Pueblo, Longmont, Golden, Fort Collins, Boulder.
And you stayed with this company for many years. Okay, so we're back with a little interruption there. Seems like we lost power. We're not exactly sure where we left off, but I think we were talking about your transition out of the Navy and back into your career with baking. So I'm not sure whether or not we captured all the details about the bakery. So why don't you tell me again the bakery that you went into?
Well, I left the Navy, of course. I got discharged and went back to work at the bakery that I had worked my entire career. And we had probably 200 and some odd people working there. The company was started by two gentlemen that were in the grocery business, and they had 6 stores, and then they sold it to National Tea. National Tea was a Midwestern large grocery chain. So they came to Denver and bought them out, and they bought other chains here in the Denver area, all the way from Cheyenne to Pueblo. And we serviced those stores with baked goods.
And you served there for
Well,
30
I stayed there from the time I was 12 years old, 33 years later. I was there until the National Tea sold this division and left Denver, and I was actually without a job. Well, I really wasn't without a job because they offered me a job in one in St. Louis and one in Milwaukee, and they asked me if I wanted to transfer and operate one of their bakeries there, but my whole family was here, and moving to the St. Louis was not my first choice, and so I decided to stay in Denver. I had a couple of other opportunities. California, and wanted a bakery superintendent. I went to California, but still decided that Denver was my place to be. And when they closed the division down, I went to work for King Soopers, which is a local grocery chain here in Denver, and I worked there as a superintendent for probably close to 10 years. They had two departments, a bakery department that involved breads and rolls, and the other department involved sweet goods. So I worked in the sweet goods department. And I stayed there for, as I mentioned, close to 10 years. And then Cub Foods came into town. Cub Foods is another chain, another grocery chain. And they're based out of Minneapolis. And they opened several stores here in Denver, and they needed a bakery administrator, a bakery, I think they call it a bakery merchandiser. So they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I was getting into my 50s, and I thought, well, this might be a place to go before I retire. So I went to Cub Foods and worked and ran their bakery departments for probably 3 or 4 years, I guess, somewhere in that area. And things weren't working out quite well. They weren't doing quite well in Denver. So I thought, well, this might be a good chance to get out before they pull out. And eventually they did, but I got out before they closed the Denver division. And that's when I decided, well, this is the time to retire. At that time I was about 59 years old, and I'd been in the baking business my whole life. I shouldn't say my whole life, because I owned a restaurant for a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
And
What was the restaurant?
the restaurant was Tasty Freeze. It was a fast food restaurant, and ran that for a couple of years, and that wasn't the best time of my life. It was almost a 24-hour job, and not much time for myself or my family, and my wife worked there too, so it wasn't a thing that I wanted to do the rest of my life, so I sold it.
Okay. After you retired, and maybe even before you retired, did you do baking at home? Is it something?
Very little baking at home. Most of the bakery business was large quantities, not conducive to doing a small cake
Gourmet
or so.
recipes.
I did some, but very little.
Okay.
I did. I decorated my daughter's wedding cake and my son's wedding cake. I did that, and I think they were quite thrilled about the fact that I could do the cake. It was a nice big wedding cake, a 3-tiered wedding cake. Right. With the little fountain in the center. It was a nice. I enjoyed it immensely to be able to make the wedding cake for my daughter and my son later on. So
you mentioned your children.
Yes, I have 2 children. My oldest is my daughter. She lives not too far from me now, and she was one of the, after high school, she offered her to pay her tuition, her room and board, and buy her a car. Sharon did not want to go to CU, Colorado University. She says, "Daddy, you can buy me the car, but I don't want to go to CU. I want to work. I want to make some money." So I said, "Boy, you're missing an opportunity." But she wouldn't budge. So I got her a job at one of the stores, and she worked there. In fact, that's where she met her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And my son, he's 4 years younger. He was a good kid. Never had any problems with him. He graduated from high school, went to the University of Colorado. He got a bachelor's degree, business administration, and he went to work for Penny's. And worked for Penny's for his entire career. He just retired 4 or 5 months ago.
Oh, okay.
He worked for Penny's for his entire career.
Did they ever, either of your children ever take an interest in your time in the service? Did you ever share that with them?
No. I've talked about the service. You're talking about talking to them about service?
Yeah, just talking to them about, your time in the Navy and
Well, we
did they ever
talked,
express an interest maybe
but
to
never
join?
in depth,
Yeah.
know. They knew I was in the service, and they knew that I served aboard ship and what I did, but nothing real in depth. There wasn't much to talk about, I was in the service, I was a baker, and I did my duty, and I went to many places in the Far East, so not much more than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, anything else you want to share with us today regarding, your time in the Navy or the impact that it had on you?
Again, the Navy was the highlight, probably one of the highlights of my life. I'll never forget. I remember fond memories to this day, of course. So.
Okay, very good. Well, the last thing I want to do then is I'm going to go ahead and pause, and we'll get a couple of shots of your uniform and pictures, and you can show them to me and talk about.
Yeah, I'll be happy to show them to you.
Okay. Let me just. Okay, so here we are again, and we're going to look through some pictures here. What do we have there?
That was boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, right outside of Chicago.
Okay, where are you in that picture? Let's get a close-up.
I was right here.
Okay. All right.
And this was right out of boot camp when I was Seaman Deuce, they call him.
Uh-huh. Dashing young man.
Pardon?
Dashing young man.
Yeah, I guess so. This was the final issue. We had a newsletter that from the USS Enrico that came out about 3 or 4 times a year, talking about all the people that served aboard ship and what they did and where they were at and what they were doing. And this was the last issue that they published in 2010.
Did you ever attend any reunions?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
Not as many as I'd like, but I did go to Colorado Springs and attended a reunion there.
And did you meet fellow crewmates?
Met a bunch of guys that I had served with.
Yeah.
A bunch of really, it was really a fun time. The guy that printed him and his wife, the guy that set up this newsletter was there, and he was a friend of mine aboard ship. So I got to reminisce with him, and he was in the same division I was in. So it was nice.
That is nice. Yeah, that's good that you keep touch with some of those individuals. You also have some other pictures there.
Yes.
Anything in there you want to highlight?
This here is probably kind of unusual. Street artist in Japan. I'm not exactly sure where it was. Sasebo, it says.
Okay.
A street artist, he drew that.
Is there a date on that?
1951.
Excellent. Okay.
11th month, so it was in...
November.
No, yeah. And I've got a few pictures. You might want to see this too. That was the boot camp, what would you call it, yearbook, I suppose?
Oh, sure.
And it has what we did in the Navy as far as the training, and pictures of what we did and so on and so forth.
Oh, are there any shots of you in there?
Yeah, there is. I'm not exactly sure where, but... Oh, here we go. That's me right here.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
And that was Company 153. And these are all the guys that were in my company.
Well, it's very nice that you still have that publication. Yeah.
Still have it. And these are all some of the pictures at aboard ship and so on.
Let's get a
Am
closer.
I showing okay there for the camera?
Yep.
That was a friend of mine, John, or Gil. And that's me aboard ship.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, let me,
I'm a little shaky there.
okay. Let's see here. Okay.
This was in boot camp. It was cold in Great Lakes in January.
I bet it was.
There's another friends of mine that's in boot camp too. And this was a friend of mine in the galley. And I think this was me. I think that was in Hawaii. Aboard ship after one of my shifts, I guess. That was me and my father-in-law. This was some kind of a celebration or NCO beer fest. That's right here.
Okay.
And this was in Tokyo, where I told you earlier that I met my my brother. This was my brother.
Oh, okay. In the Air Force.
Another
Yeah,
friend.
look at that. Yeah, they got a stripe there, an airman.
Yep.
Okay.
He passed away early in life.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. There he is again.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in Okinawa. I think I had a couple beers that I probably shouldn't have.
Uh-oh.
I hardly ever drink, but I think that time I probably had more than one.
Mm-hmm.
Same place.
Okay.
And these are friends of mine. I don't know exactly where that was at.
Okay.
I guess that's it.
Okay.
On that.
And how about these uniforms here?
Yes, this was of course my whites.
And you think they still fit?
No,
No?
they don't fit. I was surprised at the hats. I didn't know your head grew. Look at this.
Yeah.
My head. I didn't think I was a swell head or a big head, but
Funny.
that was my. There's a picture in there with that hat. Where was it? Yeah, there it is. There's a that blue, the black cap. And there's the whites and of course the blues.
And
Yeah.
you have some of your medals and ribbons.
Yes, the only one for sure I know is a good conduct. I think that's the one there.
Okay.
And then there was 4 stars on the ribbon, which included 5 tour duties in the Far East. I think that's what it means.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the other ones are.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you want to?
Well, my peacoat was the best friend I ever had in the Navy.
Oh.
That really kept me nice and warm through the cold. Japan is awful cold, so that peacoat kept me warm.
Well, very nice. Thank you for sharing all this with us
I
today.
enjoy it.
And
As I mentioned before, the Navy has been a big part of my life.
well, if there's nothing else,
I guess that's about it.
Okay.
I'm just so happy that you came by and talked to me. I enjoyed every second of it.
well, thank you for sharing your time and experiences, and thank you for your service. And at this point, we'll go ahead and end the interview.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.